The massive ship moved through space like a living nightmare. It was the size of a small moon, its black surface covered with strange patterns that pulsed with red light. The ship looked like it was alive, breathing slowly as it traveled between the stars. This was the Eternal Hunger flagship of the Velcari Dominion, and it had just finished destroying another world. Overlord Zthine stood on the command bridge, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the control panels. He was not fully organic anymore. Half of his body was machine, with metal plates covering his skin and glowing cables running under his flesh. His eyes were no longer the eyes he was born with. They were replaced with red sensors that could see across many different types of light. When he breathed, steam came from vents in his chest. The bridge around him was vast and dark. Hundreds of other Velcari worked at their stations, each one a mixture of flesh and machine like their commander. Some had metal arms that moved with perfect precision. Others had computer screens built directly into their skulls. They all shared the same red glow in their eyes, the mark of their species' evolution beyond pure biology. "Report," Zthine sighed, his voice carrying the sound of metal grinding against metal. "The harvest of System 779 is complete, Overlord," replied his second-in-command, a female Velcari whose entire lower body had been replaced with a spider-like machine. 3 billion organic units processed. All useful minerals extracted. The star will be drained within 2 cycles. Zthine nodded. Another system consumed. Another set of worlds stripped of everything valuable. The process had become so routine that he barely felt satisfaction anymore. Once, long ago, conquest had been exciting. There had been challenges, enemies who fought back with clever tactics or unexpected weapons. But that was thousands of years ago, back when the Velcari had only conquered a few galaxies. Now they had taken 17 entire galaxies. 17 collections of billions of stars, each with their own planets and species. All of them had fallen to the Velcari fleet. Some had surrendered immediately when they saw the massive ships arriving. Others had fought to the last breath. It made no difference. The result was always the same. "How long since we encountered resistance worth remembering?" Zthine asked, more to himself than to his crew. "Approximately 47 standard years." "Overlord," answered the navigation officer without hesitation. "The crystalline entities of the Zarian cluster managed to destroy 12 of our harvester ships before we adapted. 47 years. Less than a heartbeat in Velcari terms. Their species lived for thousands of years, and their empire had existed for over 1,000,000. 47 years since anything had even slowed them down." The thought should have made Zthine proud, but instead it made him restless. The truth was that conquest had become boring. When every enemy fell within hours, when every world could be stripped clean without effort, where was the challenge? Where was the glory? The Velcari had become so powerful that they were like adults fighting children. There was no honor in such easy victories. On the main screen, the last planet of System 779 was being consumed. Massive tubes extended from Velcari harvester ships, drilling deep into the planet's core. The world's surface cracked and broke apart as everything useful was sucked up into the waiting ships. Oceans boiled away. Mountains crumbled to dust. In 6 hours there would be nothing left but empty space and the distant star, which would also be drained of its energy soon enough. Zthine had watched this process thousands of times. He had personally overseen the destruction of entire civilizations. Species that had taken millions of years to evolve were erased in a single day. Their art, their culture, their dreams and hopes all turned to raw materials for the Velcari war machine. "Any signs of evacuation ships?" he asked. "Negative, Overlord." The population appeared to have no faster-than-light travel. They were trapped on their worlds when we arrived. Another species that never had a chance. They probably spent their final hours looking up at the sky, watching the massive Velcari ships blot out their sun, knowing that death was coming but unable to do anything about it. Some might have prayed to their gods. Others might have tried to hide. A few might have attempted to fight with whatever primitive weapons they possessed. None of it would have mattered. This was how the Velcari had conquered 17 galaxies. They moved like a wave of destruction, consuming everything in their path. Their technology was so advanced compared to most species that the conflicts were not really wars. They were more like natural disasters you could not negotiate with. A hurricane. You could not reason with an earthquake. The Velcari came, they took what they wanted, and they moved on. Set course for the next target, Zthine commanded. Overlord, the fleet admirals are requesting new hunting grounds. The current spiral. Arm will be completely harvested within 50 cycles. Should we begin preparations to move to the next galaxy? Zthine considered this. Moving to a new galaxy was a major operation. It required months of preparation and the coordination of millions of ships. But it also meant the possibility of finding something new, something that might provide a challenge. Not yet, he decided. There are still several sectors in this galaxy that our scouts have not fully explored. We will complete the harvest here before moving on. As you command, Overlord. The bridge fell quiet except for the soft humming of machines and the occasional report from various stations. Zthine walked to the observation deck, a massive window that looked out into space. The Eternal Hunger was surrounded by thousands of other ships, all of them part of his personal fleet. Each ship was a work of art and terror, designed to inspire fear in enemies and to efficiently destroy worlds. Some of the ships looked like giant insects with long, sharp legs that could tear apart space stations. Others resembled sea creatures from the deep ocean, all flowing curves and hidden weapons. A few were built like geometric shapes that hurt to look at, their angles designed according to mathematical principles that most organic minds could not understand. All of them shared the same black color and red lighting that marked them as Velcari vessels. All of them carried crews of enhanced warriors who had given up much of their original biology in exchange for superior capabilities. And all of them were part of the largest and most successful military force in known history. Zthrine's personal fleet contained over 2 million ships. But this was just a small part of the total Velcari armada. Across 17 galaxies, there were billions of Velcari vessels engaged in the endless work of conquest and harvest. The numbers were so large that even Zthine had trouble understanding the true scope of his empire's power. A junior officer approached, walking with the careful steps of someone who knew that disturbing the Overlord could be dangerous. Overlord, we have received reports from the Deep Scouts. Speak. They have detected unusual activity in a previously unexplored region, a small galaxy on the outer edge of our territory. The energy signatures suggest rapid technological development. This was slightly interesting. Most species develop slowly over thousands or millions of years. Rapid development usually meant that a civilization was being influenced by outside forces, possibly the remnants of a more advanced species that had escaped Velcari attention. How rapid? Zthine asked. The scouts estimate that the inhabitants have progressed from primitive radio communications to faster-than-light travel in less than 100 of their local years. Now, this was very interesting. Such rapid advancement was almost impossible without external help. Perhaps some species from a previously conquered galaxy had escaped to this region and was sharing their technology. Or perhaps there was some kind of ancient artifact providing knowledge to the local inhabitants. What is the designation of this galaxy? The scouts have designated it as Target Galaxy 77 Alpha. It appears to be a standard spiral formation with approximately 400 billion stars. Initial estimates suggest a moderate population of various species, most of them at relatively low technological levels. 400 billion stars. Even by Velcari standards, that was a significant prize. And if there was some source of advanced technology hidden there, it could provide the first real challenge Zthine had faced in decades. Prepare a conquest fleet, he ordered. Standard formation. 50,000 ships should be sufficient for a galaxy of that size. At once, Overlord. As the officer hurried away to carry out his orders, Zthine felt something he had not experienced in a long time. Anticipation, perhaps. This small galaxy would provide something more interesting than the usual routine of helpless worlds and fleeing populations. Perhaps there would be a real fight. He had no way of knowing that in that distant spiral galaxy, on a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star, the inhabitants had been watching the Velcari Empire for decades. They had studied every conquest, analyzed every battle, and prepared for the day when the great destroyers would finally turn their attention toward the Milky Way. The humans were ready. 3 weeks after the decision was made, the Velcari conquest fleet assembled at the edge of their territory. 50,000 ships gathered in the dark space between galaxies, their black hulls barely visible against the star-filled void. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, built over centuries by the greatest engineers in 17 galaxies. Together, they formed a force that could destroy entire star systems in a matter of hours. Overlord Zthine stood on the bridge of the Eternal Hunger, watching his fleet prepare for departure. Supply ships moved between the larger vessels like insects around giants, delivering ammunition, fuel, and fresh crews. The sight should have filled him with pride, but instead he felt only the familiar emptiness of routine. "Fleet status report," he commanded. "All vessels report ready for immediate departure, Overlord," his second-in-command replied. "Scouts have transmitted the exact coordinates of target Galaxy 77 Alpha. Estimated travel time at maximum speed is 14 standard days. 14 days to cross the void between galaxies." Once that journey would have been considered impossible, but Velcari technology had made it routine. Their ships could fold space around themselves, cutting through dimensions that most species could not even detect. They moved through the universe, like sharks through water, swift and deadly. "Begin the advance," Zthine ordered. The fleet moved as one. 50,000 ships activated their drives simultaneously, creating a ripple in space that could be detected from thousands of light years away. They accelerated quickly, leaving their home galaxy behind and entering the empty darkness between star systems as they traveled. Zthine reviewed the scout reports about their destination. Target Galaxy 77 Alpha was smaller than most of the galaxies they had conquered. It contained roughly 400 billion stars arranged in a spiral pattern. The energy readings suggested it was relatively young, with many active star-forming regions and a high percentage of metal-rich worlds. What made it interesting was the unusual technological development pattern the scouts had detected. Most civilizations develop slowly and predictably. They would discover fire, then agriculture, then basic tools, then more complex machines, and eventually space travel. The process usually took millions of years and followed well-understood patterns, but this galaxy was different. The scouts had detected rapid jumps in technology that seemed to skip entire developmental stages. Radio signals had appeared suddenly, followed within decades by nuclear weapons, computers, and space travel. Some species seemed to advance centuries' worth of progress in just a few years. "Communications officer?" Zthine called. Double quotes. "Yes, Overlord?" "What is the current status of the anomalous signals from the target galaxy?" The officer consulted his instruments, mechanical tentacles dancing over control panels built into his modified skull. "The signals continue to increase in complexity and power, Overlord. We are now detecting what appears to be faster-than-light communications between multiple star systems. The inhabitants have established some form of interstellar network." This was unusual. Most species took thousands of years to establish reliable communication between star systems. The fact that multiple civilizations in this galaxy had achieved it suggested either outside interference or some kind of shared knowledge base. Any indication of who might be responsible for accelerating their development? Unknown, Overlord. The signal patterns do not match any known Velcari database entries. However, analysis suggests the communications are highly organized and coordinated. This is not random technological advancement. Someone or something is deliberately guiding these species. Zthine felt a small spark of interest. Perhaps there was a surviving remnant from one of their previous conquests. hiding in this distant galaxy and sharing advanced knowledge with the local populations. If so, it would need to be located and eliminated. The Velcari did not tolerate survivors who might spread information about their weaknesses or tactics. Tactical assessment, he requested. Based on observed technology levels, standard conquest protocols should be sufficient, the tactical officer reported. Even with accelerated development, the inhabitants appear to be confined to single star systems. No evidence of large-scale fleet construction or advanced weapons. Estimated resistance. Time before complete capitulation, 6 to 12 hours. 6 to 12 hours. Even with their unusual technological advancement, the inhabitants of this galaxy would last less than half a day once the Velcari arrived. It was disappointing but not surprising. Raw technological knowledge was not enough to stand against. 1,000,000 years of military experience and superior numbers. The fleet continued its journey through the void, maintaining perfect formation despite the vast distances involved. Velcari ships were connected by quantum communication links that allowed instant coordination across light years. Each captain knew exactly where every other ship was located, and what their assigned targets would be once they reached the enemy. As they traveled, Zthine began planning the conquest strategy. The galaxy appeared to have several major civilizations spread across different regions. The logical approach would be to strike the most advanced worlds first, eliminating any potential coordination between species. Then the fleet would spread out and systematically harvest each star system, working from the outside in. Overlord, the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. We are receiving new data from the advanced scouts. Report. The technological advancement in the target galaxy has accelerated further. We are now detecting energy signatures. Consistent with advanced manufacturing, large-scale space construction, and what appears to be military preparation. Military preparation. That was more interesting. Most species only began serious military development after they detected the Velcari fleet approaching. The fact that these civilizations were already preparing suggested they somehow knew what was coming. Clarify military preparation, Zthine ordered. Multiple species appear to be constructing defensive installations around their homeworlds. We are also detecting the movement of large objects in space, possibly warships or evacuation vessels. Signal traffic between star systems has increased by over 3,000% in the past week. 3,000%. That level of communication suggested either panic or very detailed coordination. Neither option was particularly concerning from a military standpoint, but it did indicate that these species were more organized than usual. Any signs that they have detected our fleet? Negative, Overlord. We are still several days out and maintaining full stealth protocols. However, the timing of their military preparations suggests they may have advance warning through other means. Advance warning was possible if there were indeed survivors from previous conquests hiding in this galaxy. Such survivors might have knowledge of Velcari expansion patterns and could predict when an attack would come. If so, they would need to be hunted down and eliminated to prevent future interference. The days passed quickly as the fleet continued its approach. Each day brought new reports of increased activity in the target galaxy. The inhabitants were clearly preparing for something, though their preparations seemed almost pathetically inadequate compared to what was coming. On the 10th day of travel, the scouts transmitted a detailed tactical map of the galaxy. The largest concentration of advanced civilizations was located in what appeared to be a relatively small spiral arm near the galaxy's edge. This region showed the highest levels of technological activity and seemed to be the center of the military preparations. Focus our initial attack on this region, Zthine decided, indicating the area on the tactical display. If there are survivors directing the local species, they will most likely be located where the most advanced technology is. Concentrated. Understood, Overlord. Shall we prepare for standard siege protocols? No, Zthine said after a moment of consideration. I want to see what they have prepared for us. Begin with a probe attack. Send the first wave to test their defenses before committing the main fleet. This was slightly unusual. Normally, the Velcari simply overwhelmed enemy defenses with massive force from the beginning. But something about this situation made Zthine cautious. The rapid technological development, the coordinated military preparations, and the precise timing all suggested that these species knew more than they should about what was coming. Probe force composition, Overlord? 5,000 ships? Mixed types, standard combat configuration. Have them approach the outer systems of the target region and engage any defensive forces they encounter. I want detailed reports on enemy capabilities, tactics, and technology levels. At once, Overlord. As the orders were transmitted throughout the fleet, Zthine felt the familiar anticipation that came before battle. Perhaps this conquest would be more interesting than he had initially expected. Perhaps these species would provide a few moments of actual resistance before the inevitable crushing defeat. On the 12th day, the fleet reached the edge of the target galaxy. The spiral of stars stretched out before them, beautiful and doomed. Somewhere among those countless suns were billions of living beings who had no idea that their civilization was about to end. They were probably going about their daily lives, working and playing and dreaming of the future, unaware that death was approaching from the darkness between galaxies. Long-range sensors detect multiple artificial structures throughout the galaxy, the sensor officer reported, confirming presence of at least 47 distinct technological civilizations. Several appeared to have achieved interstellar travel capability. 47 civilizations. It was a rich galaxy, full of life and diversity that would soon be reduced to raw materials and energy. Zthine had seen this pattern thousands of times before. Each galaxy they conquered had its own unique species, its own cultures and achievements. All of them eventually became fuel for the Velcari war machine. "Deploy the probe force," he commanded. "Begin approach to the outer systems of the primary target region." The 5,000 ships of the probe force separated from the main fleet and began moving toward their assigned targets. They moved quickly but carefully, using their advanced sensors to map the defenses they encountered. What they found was puzzling. "Overlord, the probe force is reporting unusual readings from the target systems," the communications officer announced. "There appear to be significantly fewer defensive installations than expected based on the energy signatures we detected during approach." "Explain." "The probe commanders report that many star systems appear to be empty, Overlord. They are detecting the remains of recent industrial activity, but most of the mobile assets seem to have been moved elsewhere." Moved elsewhere. That suggested evacuation or repositioning of forces. Most species tried one of two strategies when facing Velcari invasion. They either scattered their population to hide among the stars, or they concentrated their forces for a desperate last stand. Both approaches were ultimately futile, but they sometimes provided interesting tactical challenges. "Any signs of massed enemy fleets?" "Negative, Overlord. The probe force has not encountered any significant military resistance, however." "Continue." "Sir, they are reporting something strange. The outer system of the primary target region appears to contain a single vessel waiting in deep space. It is small, Overlord, perhaps 1 kilometer in length. But it is broadcasting signals on multiple frequencies. A single ship, one small vessel, alone in the vastness of space, waiting for the arrival of 5,000 Velcari warships. It was either an act of incredible bravery or unimaginable stupidity. What kind of signals?" "Overlord, the ship appears to be broadcasting in our language, perfect Velcari linguistic patterns. They are requesting communication with Fleet Command." Zthine stared at the main display in shock. No species had ever learned Velcari language before first contact. Their linguistic patterns were incredibly complex, incorporating mathematical concepts and dimensional references that most organic minds could not comprehend. The fact that these unknown beings could speak proper Velcari was impossible, unless they had been taught by someone who already knew the language. "Open a channel," Zthine ordered. "I want to speak with whoever is commanding that vessel." As the communications system activated, Zthine realized that this conquest might be more interesting than he had anticipated. For the first time in decades, he was facing something truly unexpected. In the distance, alone in the cold vacuum of space, a small human warship waited patiently for the conversation that would change the course of galactic history. The communication channel opened with a soft chime that echoed across the bridge of the eternal hunger. For a moment, there was only silence and the background static of deep space. Then a voice spoke, clear and precise, using perfect Velcari language patterns. "Greetings, Overlord Zthine of the Velcari Dominion. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. We have been expecting you." The bridge fell completely silent. Every Velcari officer stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at the main communication display. In over 1,000,000 years of conquest, no species had ever greeted them by name. No one had ever been expecting them. And certainly no one had ever learned to speak their language without years of study and biological modification. Zthine felt something he had not experienced in centuries: genuine surprise. His red sensor eyes focused on the display, which showed only the small human ship floating alone in the darkness. The vessel was tiny compared to any Velcari warship, barely large enough to house a crew of a few hundred beings. It looked fragile and primitive, like a metal toy floating in an ocean. "You know my name," Zthine said slowly, his mechanically enhanced voice carrying clearly across the void. "Explain how this is possible." "We know many things about you, Overlord," the human voice replied calmly. "We know that you command the largest conquest fleet in Velcari history. We know that you have personally overseen the destruction of over 2,000 civilized worlds. We know that your ship, the Eternal Hunger, is 1,400,000 years old and has never been defeated in battle." The silence on the bridge deepened. These facts were not widely known even within the Velcari Empire. Ship ages were classified military information. Personal conquest records were kept in secure databases. The idea that these unknown humans had access to such detailed intelligence was deeply disturbing. "We also know," the human continued, "that you are currently leading a fleet of exactly 50,000 ships toward our galaxy, believing this will be another routine harvest operation. We know that you sent a probe force of 5,000 ships ahead to test our defenses. And we know that you have never encountered meaningful resistance in over 47 years. Zthrine's mechanical hands clenched involuntarily. Every piece of information the human had mentioned was absolutely correct. But it was impossible for them to know these things. The Velcari maintained strict communication security. Their quantum channels were unbreakable. No species had ever successfully infiltrated their command networks. "How?" he demanded. "We have been watching you for a very long time, Overlord. We have studied your methods, analyzed your technology, and learned your weaknesses. We know exactly how you operate and why you have been so successful for so long." "Impossible. No species has the capability to observe Velcari operations without detection." "You are correct," Captain Chun replied. "No single species has that capability, but we are not acting alone." On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing. Ships were decloaking throughout the outer system, revealing themselves one by one, but these were not human vessels. The ships that materialized came in dozens of different designs, representing technologies and aesthetics from across the galaxy. Some were crystalline structures that sparkled like jewels against the stars. Others were smooth, flowing shapes that seemed to bend light around them. A few appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Each design was completely different, representing a unique evolutionary path and technological approach. "What you see before you," Captain Chun explained, "is the Galactic Resistance Coalition. Representatives from every species that has escaped Velcari conquest over the past 300 years. Survivors who have spent decades preparing for this moment." Zthine stared at the display in growing alarm. Hundreds of ships were now visible, and more were appearing every second. Each one represented a civilization that should have been completely destroyed. The Velcari were thorough in their conquests. They hunted down evacuation fleets and eliminated refugee populations. The idea that so many survivors had not only escaped but managed to organize themselves was unthinkable. Survivors do not pose a threat to the Velcari Dominion, Zthine stated, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. You may have gathered a collection of refugee vessels, but you cannot stand against our superior numbers and technology. You are partially correct, the human admitted. Individually, none of our species could challenge your empire. But we have had a very long time to prepare. We have shared our knowledge, combined our technologies, and developed new approaches specifically designed to counter your advantages. Demonstrate, Zthine commanded, curious despite himself. Very well, the tactical display suddenly exploded. With new information, every Velcari ship in the probe force was now clearly visible on the human sensors, despite the fact that they were using full stealth protocols. Not only were they visible, but detailed technical readouts were appearing next to each vessel, showing power levels, weapon configurations, and structural weak points. How are you penetrating our stealth systems? Zthine demanded. The Kepler taught us how to detect your quantum signatures, Captain Chun replied matter-of-factly. They are the crystalline beings from the Zarian cluster, the ones you conquered 47 years ago. Some of them escaped and have spent decades studying the sensor data from their final battle. They learned to track your ships through dimensional space. The Kepler, Zthine remembered them well. They had been the last species to cause significant damage to a Velcari fleet before today. Their crystal-based technology had been impressive, if ultimately inadequate. The idea that survivors had been studying that battle and developing countermeasures was deeply concerning. The Nexari provided us with information about your communication protocols, the human continued. The Veltar shared details about your weapon systems. The Zephyrians taught us about your ship construction methods. Each survivor species contributed something unique to our understanding of your capabilities. With each name mentioned, Zthine felt his confidence eroding further. These were all civilizations he remembered conquering personally, worlds he had watched burn, populations he had seen harvested. The fact that so many had escaped and were now working together represented a massive intelligence failure. Even with stolen knowledge, you lacked the industrial capacity to threaten our empire, he insisted. That would normally be true, Captain Chain agreed. But we have had an unexpected advantage. You see, Overlord, one of the species you conquered, possessed something very special. Something that has allowed us to prepare on a scale you never imagined possible. Explain. The architects of Kepler 442, do you remember them? You conquered their system 112 years ago. They were master builders who could construct massive structures in space using nothing but raw stellar energy and basic materials. You harvested their worlds and thought you had eliminated them completely. Zthine did remember. The architects had been remarkable engineers, capable of building planet-sized structures in a matter of months. Their technology would have been valuable if it could have been captured intact, but they had destroyed most of their installations rather than allow them to fall into Velcari hands. Some of them escaped, Captain Chun continued. They have spent over a century building hidden bases throughout this galaxy. Massive construction facilities powered by entire stars hidden in places you would never think to look. They have been preparing for your arrival for decades. As if to demonstrate this point, the long-range sensors began detecting new signatures throughout the galaxy. Massive structures were powering up, revealing themselves for the first time. Space stations the size of moons. Shipyards that could construct fleets in a matter of days. Weapons platforms that drew their energy directly from nearby stars. This is impossible, Zthine whispered. Is it? Captain Chun asked. You have conquered 17 galaxies, Overlord? That means you have displaced the populations of trillions of worlds. Did you really think that all of them died? Did you never consider that some might escape, regroup, and plan their revenge? The truth was that Zthine had never seriously considered such a possibility. The Velcari were so overwhelmingly powerful that the idea of scattered survivors posing a real threat had never occurred to him. Individuals might escape, small groups might flee to distant systems, but organizing an effective resistance seemed impossible. "You have shown me survivors and hidden bases," he said, trying to regain his composure. "But you are still vastly outnumbered. My fleet alone contains 50,000 ships. The total Velcari armada numbers in the billions. Even if you have built new vessels, you cannot match our numerical superiority." "You are correct about our numbers," Captain Chun admitted. "We have perhaps 10,000 ships ready for immediate combat. Against your 50,000, those odds would normally be hopeless. Then you understand the futility of resistance." "No, Overlord. What I understand is the importance of choosing your battles carefully. You see, we do not intend to fight your fleet ship to ship. We intend to fight you in a way that nullifies your numerical advantage. There is no tactic that can overcome such disparity in force, isn't there? Tell me, Overlord, what happens to your fleet if you cannot communicate with your ships? What happens if you cannot coordinate your attacks? What happens if you cannot tell friend from foe?" Before Zthine could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. The communications officer turned to him with panic in his enhanced eyes. "Overlord, we are losing contact with the probe force. All quantum communication links are being disrupted. We cannot reach any of our forward units. Impossible. Velcari quantum communications cannot be jammed. The jamming is not affecting our quantum channels directly," the officer explained rapidly. "Something is interfering with the dimensional matrices that anchor our communication network. The channels exist, but they are ... confused. Messages are being routed to random destinations." On the tactical display, the neat formation of the probe force began to break apart. Ships that should have been maintaining perfect coordination started drifting out of position. Some began turning toward their own allies, apparently receiving contradictory orders. Others simply stopped moving, their crews unable to communicate with each other or with Fleet Command. "The Veltar were communications specialists before you conquered them," Captain Chun explained calmly. "They spent 60 years studying the quantum communication breakdown that occurred during their final battle. They learned how to turn your own coordination systems against you." Zthine watched in horror as his probe force descended into chaos. Ships were colliding with each other as their navigation systems received conflicting data. Some vessels were firing warning shots at their own allies, apparently believing they were under attack. The perfectly organized military formation was becoming a confused mass of metal drifting aimlessly through space. "This is only a demonstration," Captain Chun continued. "We wanted you to understand what you are facing before we begin serious negotiations." "Negotiations?" Zthine struggled to process what he was seeing. "The Velcari do not negotiate. We conquer. That may have been true in the past, Overlord. But today, you are going to learn something new. Today, you are going to discover what it feels like to be the smaller force facing impossible odds. Today, you are going to understand what every species you have conquered felt when they saw your ships approaching." The probe force was now completely out of control. Several ships had collided and were drifting as debris. Others were firing randomly into space, their crews apparently unable to distinguish between enemy vessels and empty void. The mighty Velcari war machine, which had conquered 17 galaxies with perfect precision, had been reduced to a chaotic mob in a matter of minutes. "What do you want?" Zthine asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We want you to listen. Overlord, we want you to understand that your age of easy conquest is over. We want you to realize that you are no longer the apex predators of this universe." Captain Chun paused, letting the weight of her words sink in across the bridge of the eternal hunger. "And then, if you are wise, we want you to surrender." Overlord Zthine stared at the tactical display, his mechanical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. His probe force, 5,000 of the most advanced warships in the known universe, was floating helplessly in space like debris from an ancient battle. Some ships were still firing randomly, their crews apparently unable to tell where they were or what they were supposed to be doing. "Surrender," he repeated slowly, as if the word was foreign to him. "The Velcari do not surrender. We have never surrendered. We are the apex predators of 17 galaxies." "Were," Captain Chun corrected gently. "You were the apex predators, but evolution never stops, Overlord. There's always something bigger, something smarter, something more adapted to survive. Today you discover what it feels like to be prey." Zthrine's red sensor eyes flashed with anger. Centuries of absolute power and unchallenged dominance had not prepared him for this moment. The very concept of retreat or negotiation was alien. To Velcari thinking, they were conquerors. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. The idea that some collection of refugee survivors could threaten them was absurd. "You have disrupted communications with a single formation," he said, his voice returning to its usual commanding tone. "A clever trick, but ultimately meaningless. I still command 45,000 ships. Even without coordination, that is more than enough firepower to sterilize every world in this galaxy." "Is it?" Captain Chun asked. "Let me ask you something. Overlord, how many of your ships can function without constant communication with Fleet Command? How many of your captains have ever fought an independent battle without detailed orders from above?" The question struck home more than Zthrine wanted to admit. The Velcari military was built around perfect coordination and overwhelming force. Individual ship commanders were trained to follow precise instructions from the command hierarchy. Independent thinking was discouraged because it led to tactical inconsistency. When you had millions of ships, you needed them all to act as one massive weapon, but that strength was also a weakness. Few Velcari captains had experience making decisions without orders. Most had never fought a battle where they could not communicate with their superiors or coordinate with neighboring ships. The probe force was proof of what happened when that coordination broke down. "Our captains are trained warriors," Zthrine insisted. "They will adapt, will they? Let us find out." On the display, something new began to happen. The human ship, the tiny Defiance, started moving toward the confused probe force. It accelerated smoothly, its course taking it directly into the middle of the chaotic formation. Zthrine watched with growing amazement as the small vessel approached, his warships without any apparent fear. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "We are going to give you a demonstration," Captain Chun replied calmly. "We want to show you what happens when superior numbers meet superior tactics." The Defiance was now within weapons range of the nearest Velcari ships. Those vessels should have immediately opened fire, vaporizing the small human craft in seconds. Velcari weapons were designed to destroy targets much larger and more heavily armored than the approaching ship. Instead, the Velcari ships did nothing. Their crews were still struggling with communication failures and contradictory orders. Some tried to target the Defiance, but their weapon systems received conflicting data about friend and foe identification. Others attempted to contact Fleet Command for instructions, but got only static and confusion. The Defiance moved through the formation like a hunter among sheep. As it passed each Velcari ship, something strange happened. Precise energy beams lanced out from the human vessel, striking critical systems with surgical accuracy. The beams were not powerful enough to destroy the massive alien warships, but they did not need to be. "Impossible," Zthrine whispered as he watched ship after ship go dark. "Our armor should deflect such weak weapons." "Your armor is designed to stop the weapons you understand," Captain Chun explained. "Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion warheads. But we are not using any of those things. The hegemony of Tau Ceti developed these weapons before you conquered them. Weapons that target the quantum foundations of matter itself. Your armor cannot stop something that attacks the basic structure of reality." Ship after ship fell silent. As the Defiance continued its impossible attack run, the human vessel moved with perfect precision, never staying in one place long enough for the confused Velcari crews to target it effectively. Its weapons struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling Power systems, weapons arrays, and life support with surgical strikes. What made it even more disturbing was how easy it looked. The Defiance was not struggling or taking damage. It moved through the formation of 5,000 warships as if they were not even there. Each strike was calculated and precise. There was no wasted effort, no random destruction. The human ship knew exactly where to hit each target to achieve maximum effect. "How do you know our weak points?" Zthine asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The collective of Rigel spent 40 years analyzing the wreckage of their destroyed fleet, Captain Chun replied. They mapped every structural weakness. In Velcari ship design, the Void Walkers of the Magellanic Clouds contributed gravitational analysis of your hull materials. The machine minds of Proxima shared computational models of your power distribution systems. Each name represented another species that should have been completely destroyed. Another civilization that had somehow escaped and spent decades preparing for revenge. The scope of the intelligence failure was staggering. How many other survivor groups were out there? How much did they know? Every species you conquered taught us something new about how to hurt you, Captain Chun continued. Every battle you won gave us more data to analyze. Every world you destroyed created more survivors with motivation to see you fall. The Defiance had now disabled over half the probe force. The remaining ships were trying to reorganize, but without communications they could not coordinate their efforts. Some attempted to ram the human vessel, but it was too fast and maneuverable. Others tried to retreat, but found their navigation systems compromised by the same interference that had disrupted their communications. This is impossible, Zthine repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. He was watching the impossible happen before his eyes. A single small ship was systematically destroying a formation that could have conquered entire star systems. What you are seeing, Captain Chun explained, is the result of 300 years of preparation. Every survivor species contributed something to this moment. Knowledge, technology, tactics, intelligence. We have studied you longer and more carefully than you have ever studied any enemy. The last of the probe force ships went dark. 5,000 vessels, each one capable of destroying planets, had been disabled by a single ship no larger than a Velcari scout vessel. The debris field that had once been a proud military formation now drifted silently through space, their crews trapped aboard powerless hulks. Surrender now, Captain Chun said, and we will allow your crews to evacuate safely. We have no interest in unnecessary killing. We simply want your empire to stop expanding. Zthine felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. Not fear of death, which was a concept all warriors understood, but fear of obsolescence. Fear that everything he had believed about very superiority was wrong. Fear that his species was not the apex predator he had always assumed. You have disabled one small formation, he said, trying to project confidence he did not feel. But I still have 45,000 ships. Even if you can repeat this trick, you cannot fight my entire fleet. Can we not? Computer, begin tactical. Demonstration sequence 2. The main display changed, showing the positions of the entire Velcari fleet. 45,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, ready to advance into the galaxy and begin the conquest. It was an impressive sight, a demonstration of raw military power that had intimidated countless civilizations. Then new contacts began appearing on the display. Ships decloaking throughout the region, appearing in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. But these were not the hundreds of vessels from the original coalition fleet. These were thousands upon thousands of new contacts, representing ship designs and technologies from across the galaxy. What you are seeing, Captain Chun explained, is the result of over a century of hidden construction. The architects did not just build a few secret bases. They built an entire shadow navy using technologies and designs from every species you have ever conquered. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands of ships were now visible, and more were appearing every second. Each one represented a different approach to space warfare, a unique technological evolution that had been preserved by survivors and refugees. Crystal ships that could phase in and out of normal space, biological vessels that could regenerate damage in real time, mechanical constructs that operated without crews, controlled by artificial minds that thought faster than organic brains. Impossible, Zthine breathed. The industrial capacity required to build such a fleet. It would take thousands of years. It did take thousands of years, Captain Chun replied. Work began the day the first species escaped your conquest. Every generation of survivors added to the project. Every refugee carried knowledge and technology to the hidden shipyards. This fleet represents the combined efforts of every civilization you have destroyed. The tactical display was now showing enemy contacts that outnumbered the Velcari fleet by 3 to 1. Over 100,000 ships arranged in formations that surrounded Zthrone's forces completely. His fleet, which had seemed so powerful just minutes ago, was now trapped in the middle of a much larger enemy force. You cannot have built so many ships without us detecting them, Zthine protested. The phantom builders of Andromeda taught us their secrets of dimensional construction, Captain Chun explained patiently. Ships built in folded space, invisible to normal sensors until activated. The Timekeeper civilization contributed temporal manipulation technology that allowed construction to happen faster than normal time. The living ships of the verdant worlds grew vessels that registered as asteroids on most scanning systems. Each explanation made the situation worse. Not only was his fleet outnumbered, but the enemy had technologies that the Velcari had never encountered. Weapons and defenses developed specifically to counter everything the Empire had learned over 1,000,000 years of conquest. Even with superior numbers, Zthine said desperately, you lack our experience. We have conquered 17 galaxies. We know how to fight. Do you? When was the last time you fought against an enemy that could match your technology? When was the last time you faced opposition that understood your tactics? You have become excellent at destroying helpless civilizations, Overlord. But you have forgotten how to fight against equals. As if to prove her point, the enemy fleet began to move. But they did not advance in the chaotic rush that most species used when attacking. Instead, they moved with the same perfect coordination. That had always been the Velcari's greatest advantage. Different ship types supported each other seamlessly. Formations shifted and adapted in real time to counter any defensive moves the Velcari might attempt. Impossible, Zthine whispered for the 4th time. Only we have that level of coordination. You taught it to us, Captain Chun replied. Every battle you fought showed us how to move fleets effectively. Every conquest demonstrated the importance of coordination and mutual support. We watched you destroy galaxy after galaxy, and we learned from every mistake our predecessors made. The enemy fleet was now moving into attack position. Weapons were powering up across thousands of ships, each one designed to exploit different weaknesses in Velcari defenses. It was clear that this was not going to be the usual one-sided slaughter that Zthine was accustomed to. This was going to be a real battle against an enemy that knew how to fight. Last chance, Overlord, Captain Chun said. Order your fleet to power down weapons and prepare for evacuation. We will allow you to leave this galaxy unharmed if you agree to end your expansion permanently. Zthine looked at the tactical display, at the impossible fleet that surrounded his forces, at the small human ship that had single-handedly destroyed 5,000 of his best vessels. For the first time in his long life, he faced a choice that every species he had conquered had faced: fight against impossible odds, or surrender and hope for mercy. The apex predator had become the prey. Overlord Zthine stood in the command center of the Eternal Hunger, staring at the tactical display that showed his doom. 100,000 enemy ships surrounded his fleet like predators circling wounded prey. For the first time in over 1,000,000 years, a Velcari force was completely outmatched and trapped with no hope of victory. The bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of machinery and the nervous breathing of his crew. Every officer watched their commander, waiting for orders that would either save them or lead them to glorious destruction. But Zthine found himself unable to speak. The concepts of retreat and surrender were so foreign to Velcari thinking that he had no words for what he was feeling. "Overlord," his second-in-command whispered urgently, "we must respond. The enemy fleet is moving into final attack position." Zthine looked at her, seeing his own confusion reflected in her enhanced eyes. She had served under him for 3 centuries, had watched him conquer dozens of worlds with casual efficiency. Now she was asking him to make a decision that no Velcari commander had ever faced, whether to fight a battle they could not win. "How long do we have?" he asked quietly. "The enemy fleet will be in optimal firing position in approximately 6 minutes, the tactical officer reported. "Their weapons appear to be fully charged and ready. 6 minutes to decide the fate of 50,000 ships and their crews. 6 minutes to choose between certain death and impossible surrender." Zthine had made thousands of tactical decisions over his long career, but none of them had ever felt like this. "Open the communication channel," he ordered. Captain Chun's voice came through clearly, still calm and patient despite commanding the largest military force in galactic history. "Yes, Overlord?" "If we surrender," Zthine said slowly, "what happens to my crews?" "They will be safely evacuated to neutral worlds where they can live peacefully. We have no interest in revenge against individual soldiers. Our quarrel is with your empire's expansion, not with the people who serve it. And my ships will be disabled and studied. The technologies will be shared with the coalition species to help defend against future Velcari aggression. Your weapons will be removed, but the vessels themselves will not be destroyed unnecessarily." Zthine considered this. In the Velcari Empire, defeated enemies were usually harvested completely. Their populations were processed into raw materials. Their worlds were stripped of resources, and their technologies were absorbed into the war machine. The idea that an enemy might show mercy to defeated foes was almost incomprehensible. "Why?" he asked. "Why offer mercy to those who have shown you none?" "Because we are not you," Captain Chun replied simply. "We remember what it was like to be the helpless victims. We remember the fear and desperation of watching our worlds burn. We do not want to become the thing we fought against." The answer was so alien to Velcari thinking that Zthine almost could not process it. In his understanding, the strong took what they wanted from the weak. That was the natural order of the universe. The idea that power could be used with restraint was a foreign concept. "You could destroy us completely," he said. "Why give us the chance to regroup and return?" "Because we are not offering you the chance to return?" Captain Chin's voice hardened slightly. "This is not a temporary truce, Overlord. This is the end of Velcari expansion, forever." "Explain." "What you are facing here is just the beginning. This coalition fleet represents survivors from only the most recent conquests. But word of our success here will spread throughout your empire. Every species you have ever conquered, every world you have ever harvested, will learn that the Velcari can be defeated." The tactical display changed, showing a map of the entire known galaxy. Red indicators marked Velcari territory, covering vast regions of space. But as Zthine watched, new contacts began appearing throughout those regions. Small fleets, hidden bases, resistance cells that had remained secret for centuries. "We have been preparing for this moment for 300 years, Captain Chun continued. "Not just here, but everywhere. In every galaxy you control, survivors have been building ships, gathering weapons, and waiting for the signal that resistance was possible." More contacts appeared on the display. Fleets emerging from hidden asteroid bases. Ships decloaking near major Velcari installations. Weapons platforms activating around conquered worlds. The scope of the coordinated uprising was staggering. "This is impossible," Zthine breathed. "Our intelligence networks would have detected such widespread organization." "Your intelligence networks were designed to find external threats, Captain," Chun replied. "But we were never external to your empire. We lived within it, hiding among the populations you thought you had completely controlled. The children and grandchildren of refugees, passing down knowledge and waiting for their chance. Zthine realized the true scope of what he was seeing. This was not just a military defeat. This was the collapse of everything the Velcari Empire had built. 17 galaxies worth of conquered territory was simultaneously erupting in coordinated rebellion. You cannot control such vast territories with rebel fleets harassing your supply lines, Captain Chun explained. You cannot maintain order when every world might hide resistance fighters. You cannot expand when you must use all your forces just to hold what you already have. Even if this rebellion succeeds temporarily, Zthine said desperately, the Velcari Empire has millions of ships. Eventually, we will crush these uprisings and restore order. Will you? Let me show you something else. The display changed again, this time showing detailed intelligence about Velcari military assets throughout the Empire. Fleet positions, base locations, supply routes, command structures. The level of detail was incredible, showing information that should have been classified at the highest levels. We know where every major Velcari fleet is located, Captain Chun said. We know your supply requirements, your maintenance schedules, your patrol routes. We have been watching and learning for centuries. When this battle ends, that information will be transmitted to resistance cells throughout your empire. Impossible. Such intelligence would require agents at the highest levels of command. It would, and we have them. The words hit Zthine like a physical blow. Agents within the Velcari command structure. Spies who had access to the most sensitive military information. The idea that the Empire had been infiltrated so completely was terrifying. Who? He demanded. Does it matter? The point is that your empire is not as secure as you believed. Your information is not as protected as you thought. Your enemies know you better than you know yourselves. Zthine felt his worldview crumbling around him. Everything he had believed about Varay's superiority was being systematically destroyed. They were not the apex predators. They were not invincible. They were not even particularly well informed about their own empire. Time remaining, 2 minutes. The tactical officer announced quietly, 2 minutes to make the most important decision in Velcari history. Zthine looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing the fear and confusion in their enhanced faces. They had served the Empire faithfully, following orders and conquering worlds because that was what Velcari did. They did not deserve to die for the failures of their leadership. If I surrender, he said slowly, will you guarantee the safety of my crews? I will, Captain Chun replied immediately, and if I refuse? Then this battle will begin, and it will end with the complete destruction of your fleet. You have seen what one ship can do against 5,000. What do you think 100,000 ships will do against 45,000? Zthine closed his enhanced eyes and made his choice. All ships, he broadcast on the fleet-wide communication channel. This is Overlord Zthine. Power down all weapon systems and prepare for evacuation procedures. We are surrendering to the enemy. Fleet. The words felt strange in his mouth. No Velcari commander had ever spoken them before. But as he watched his ships comply with the order, powering down their weapons and opening their airlocks for evacuation, he felt something unexpected, relief. The battle that would have killed thousands of beings on both sides would not happen. His crews would live to see their families again. The cycle of endless conquest and destruction was finally being broken. Surrender confirmed, Captain Chun announced. Evacuation ships are en route to collect your crews. They will be treated with dignity and respect. Over the next several hours, Zthine watched as his entire fleet was systematically evacuated. Coalition ships arrived to collect Velcari personnel, who were transported to neutral worlds where they could begin new lives away from the Empire's military structure. The massive warships that had once terrorized galaxies sat empty and powerless, their weapons removed and their systems disabled. Finally, only the command crew of the Eternal Hunger remained. Zthine stood alone on his bridge, looking out at the coalition fleet that had defeated him so completely. A human shuttle was approaching to collect him and his remaining officers. Overlord, Captain Chun's voice came through the communication. System one last time. Before you go, I want you to understand something. This was never about destroying the Velcari people. This was about stopping the Velcari Empire. Your species can have a future, but it will be a different future than the one you planned. What happens now? Zthine asked. Now the galaxy begins to heal. Worlds that were harvested will be restored. Species that were scattered will be reunited. The survivors of your conquests will rebuild their civilizations in peace. And the Velcari will learn to live as equals instead of masters. It will not be easy, but it is possible. We have seen other species make the transition from conquerors to citizens. The human shuttle docked with the Eternal Hunger, and Zthine prepared to leave his ship for the last time. As he walked toward the airlock, he paused and looked back. At the bridge where he had commanded the destruction of so many worlds. Captain Chun, he said quietly, double quote. Yes, Overlord? How did you know? How did humans become the ones to organize all of this? There was a long pause before she answered. Because we had something the other species did not. We had time to prepare, and we had a reason to succeed. You see, Overlord, you never actually conquered Earth, you only thought you did. Zthine felt a chill run through his enhanced body. What do you mean? The Velcari Empire has records of conquering a species called humans over 200 years ago. Small blue world, primitive technology, quickly harvested and forgotten. But those records are wrong. What you conquered was not our homeworld. It was a colony we had evacuated specifically to serve as bait. The implications hit him like a physical blow. The Velcari had been manipulated from the very beginning. Humans had deliberately sacrificed one world to make the Empire believe they were extinct, buying time to prepare for this moment. We have been planning this for over 2 centuries, Captain Chun continued. Watching you, learning from you, preparing for the day when we would be strong enough to stop you. Everything that happened here today was designed and planned by humans who never forgot what you did to our colony. As Zthine stepped aboard the human shuttle, he realized that he had been defeated not just by superior numbers or better technology, but by something the Velcari had never truly understood. The power of patience and long-term planning. The shuttle pulled away from the Eternal Hunger, carrying him toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the coalition fleet began its work of liberation, spreading throughout Velcari, space to free the populations that had been enslaved for so long. The age of Velcari dominance was over. The age of freedom had begun, and at the center of it all, the small blue world called Earth continued its orbit around an ordinary yellow star, its people finally able to sleep peacefully knowing that the great destroyers would never threaten anyone again.